Hi, this is Bill Kenower of Author magazine, and today we're talking to Andre Dubus, author of the memoir Townie. We caught up with him in Seattle, Washington, and discussed literature, violence, and the challenges of writing a memoir. Enjoy.
I got beat up a lot. I was always a new kid. I had glasses. I used big words, and at 15 I snapped. My brother was beaten up badly, and I didn't defend him. And my sense of my self-worth got so low that I didn't care what happened to me anymore. I didn't care if I was killed. I was going to never not fight again. So I began to transform my body and get stronger, and I began to fight and fought for 10 years. But absolutely, it was when I discovered writing, which seemed to come about almost mystically to me on a day when I was actually planning to go to the boxing gym to train. Instead, I sat down and started to write a scene. From that moment on, well, first two things happened. I felt all this pent-up aggression inside me, kind of like a steam valve opened up, and it was another way to express what was the inside out. There wasn't just throwing punches. And the second thing was, you and I have talked before, my own taste is for character-driven fiction, and, this whole daily act of trying to become another person, to enter their own private skin, is inherently empathetic. And it was very hard to go from trying to imagine what it's like to be someone else to punching someone in the face later that day just because they were doing bad things. So writing definitely got me on a track that eventually got violence out of my life altogether. I think if writing's taught me nothing over the years, it keeps teaching me the same thing, which is just get the hell out of the way, dear author. Just let the writing take over. And that's actually something that can be encouraged, by the way, I think, to writing students, but it can't really be taught. It's really something you have to teach yourself. You can teach the young writer tools like specific language and active verbs over passive verbs, etc., concrete, sensual detail, but you can't teach receptivity and humility. And that's what you and I have talked about before, that this whole creative writing process, it seems to me, and I think it's true of many other art forms as well, if not all of them. It's really this larger act of humbling yourself to the work. And whenever I've done that, and writing Townie, I really felt as if I was finally receiving the story, even though, oddly though, I knew the story because I lived it, and I was the main character in that little tale, I still felt as though I was receiving it for the first time and just trying to get it all down. Writing and human creativity in general, I would argue, doesn't care about your career. And in fact, if you think about your readership or your audience, you will be in a state of self-consciousness that will make it impossible to surrender yourself completely and wholly to the work. So once I finally started to make these adjustments, I felt for the first time that I was writing closer to the ground, that I was actually beginning to write more with my body and less with my head, that I was dreaming more and thinking less, that I was stepping into the page not with so much something to say, which is another one of my challenges early on, but with something to find. I had no agenda. There's that great line from Flannery O'Connor from one of her essays, there's a certain grain of stupidity the writer can hardly do without, and that is the quality of having to stare. I was cultivating stupidity, or another beautiful way to put it, William Stafford in his essay said the poet must put himself into a state of openness or receptivity before writing poetry. And he defined receptivity in two ways, more poetically than I'm about to say, but it's two parts. One, you are being truly receptive, or you are more a receiving vessel, he argued, when you are willing to accept anything that comes, no matter what it is, which is easier said than done, because we don't live our lives that way, nor should we. We don't accept anything that comes. So willingness to accept anything that comes, and two, a willingness to fail. And once I was able to start to incorporate that, it's very simple advice, but it's not easy. I'll tell you what, I need to share some advice that the writer Richard Rousseau gave me. He's become a friend, and the hardest part of writing this was not bearing my soul, but shining a light on other people in my life and feeling like I was violating their privacy, because They weren't writing their memoir. I was writing mine, and but we don't live in a vacuum. I couldn't not write about the people I grew up with without, avoiding my life. So I was telling Rousseau how tortured I felt about, violating the privacy of my siblings or parents, and he said, well, I would ask this: am I trying to settle a score with anyone writing this memoir? And if the answer is yes, I'm trying to settle a score, then I wouldn't write it or I wouldn't publish it. But if the answer was no, I'm not trying to settle a score with anyone, then I'm just trying to capture it as I remember it, as honestly and fairly as I can, then I would write it. That would be another piece of advice I would throw if someone's writing memoirs. Make sure enough years have passed. Because if enough years have not passed, you're going to still be incapable of non-judgment. And I met a young writer in Boston a couple weeks ago who was working on a memoir from only 5 years earlier. I said, wow, well, I needed 35 years to pass, but if you can do it, God bless you, but I have a hunch he's going to need more time.
It's like trying to talk about a fight when you can still feel the blow on you, right? How
Yeah.
are you going to be anything but hurt, angry?
Right, you're too affected by it. Truman Capote's got that great line, the writer must write as cool and detached as a surgeon. Boy, I think that's so the case, especially with memoir.